How's everybody doing tonight? Give me a one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Ooh, man, I'm dragging today. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Let me get my mic on. Oh, appreciate that, Larry. No video yet. It's probably gonna take a minute. Let's see if it shows up. Let's see. Let's see. Video. Oh, we still count down. Video one. Okay. All good. All good. Going over these configuration families. What's up, Tobias? Shout out to Tobias. Shout out to Regine. Go check out that AWS data center Regine. That video was for you. Go check that one out when you get a little chance. Shout out to Tobias, one of my earlier students who I knew was going to do big things. So shout out to him. I definitely got to get him on YouTube and get him on this interview. I was going to interview a few of my old students. So y'all know PBO was actually a professor in real life. Shout out to Tobias there on LinkedIn. Let me go over to LinkedIn and give him a shout out. Y'all know I be struggle streaming on LinkedIn though. I be trying. Let's see if I can get on over there. Let's see. You know how we do it. If you got any questions, just put them in the chat box. Shout out to my man Tobias. Got to get him on here so we can interview him. Let's see if I can find my stream events. Be nice if they come out in order. Configuration management. Let's see if I can get it in there. And we get started. Yeah, there's my man right there. Give me what's up. Yep, he said, let's do it. I seen him on LinkedIn, gave him the thumbs up. I'll reach out to you, Tobias. I'm trying to get my interview game back up. I said one of my earlier students doing it big. Like I said, man, what's that been about 15 years ago, Tobias? That's been a minute since I taught. So, but no, that's one of the things I've kind of regret when I stopped teaching. I mean, the university wasn't seeing eye to eye, so, but it's all good. I'm thinking about teaching a course on YouTube. I reached out to Professor Ozier's doing a GRC Academy, so we kind of chopping it up. I'll probably make that happen. So let's get started. You see it right there, configuration management, one of the bigger families in NIST 800-53, especially in the GRC section. I always like to show an architectural diagram. So configuration management. So what would that look like, right? So your EC2s, you probably have a cloud formation. The cloud formation will build your EC2, build your architecture, and that cloud formation will be the configuration for your whole architecture. Because of that cloud formation, you can tell it what type of EC2s on a web tier, what spin up Apache or IIS, or using, you see it right there, Aurora DB, which, you know, we can use the Postgres SQL engine, but you can use cloud formation. I talked about in the video, right? This infrastructure as code, right? Now, infrastructure code would be what's in your configuration management, right? Because that infrastructure will be how would you build it out, how would you get it kind of flowing and going. Yeah, you were asking me about AZs, all right, availability zones. I thought I had a video for that, so I just wanted to put that out there. Shout out to Tobias for Let's Do It on interview. One of my earlier students. So I probably interview 3 or 4 of my students. I see them floating around on LinkedIn doing big things. So once again, if you know cloud formation, that's infrastructure as code. And with that file, right, it could be YAML or a couple other things. It will build your whole architecture for you, right? It builds your VPCs, it'll connect to your load balancer, it'll connect your web tier and your app tier, right? And once again, that will be configuration of what you would build. All right. If you found an error, right, that'll be version 1. You would update it to version 2. Then if you need to roll back to version 1, all right. So that's what configuration management is. And we're going to delve into it at the end and talk about some of the nomenclature of configuration management, CIs, right? What's a CI? What's a CL? What's the roles that are in configuration management, and how we would actually do that, right? So that's one thing we're gonna talk a little bit about. And once again, you got any general questions, just drop them in the chat. I usually probably drop the link down later if anybody wants to come up and chat. But let's go and get busy on it and knock it on out. Late night with PBO, somebody said that. So let's go, right? So we talked about NIST. We know it's Department of Commerce. We know NIST was the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014, aka FISMA. Here's the 20 families we kind of working our way through. Today we're talking about the CM family right there, configuration management. So we're going to do a video of each one of these at a high level. Then we're going to pick some and start drilling down in it. So I just thought that would be get your toe wet. Let's talk about each one of the families at a pretty high level. So let's get into it. Once again, we're doing CM tonight, configuration management. And there you see it, CM2. CM is the configuration management security family. Baseline configuration. Baseline configuration for systems and system component, including connectivity, operation, and communication aspects. We're looking at the discussion. A lot of times I like looking actually at the NIST 800-53 because they delve deep into deep detail, right? A lot of times I like to look in the discussions, all right? It'll give you much clarity on it. So once again, baseline configurations are documented, formally reviewed, and agreed upon specification for your system of configuration items within those systems. So part of that will be a CCB, right? Some kind of configuration control board. You need to have management or somebody at the management level says, this is what we want to do. And part of that, we're going to touch in there, what's the security impact of your configuration, right? If it's new functionality, did it get reviewed? Did it get security reviewed? Right, so all that's in there. Baseline configuration serves as a basis for future builds, release, or changes to systems, including security and privacy control implementations, operational procedures, information about system components, network topology, logical placement of components in the system architecture. Maintaining baseline configuration requires creating new baselines as organizational system changes over time. Baseline configurations of system reflects the current enterprise architecture, right? So you as a GRC person has got to work with the system architect, work with the security architect, right? Because the baseline is really, like you said, the baseline is what your architecture was. So once again, this would be a baseline of architecture. And if we want to add a data warehouse or we don't want to add a S3 bucket, it is not showing the administration subnets. So the DBAs and the web admins can log in and work on different stuff, right? So that will be additional configuration changes that we would have to get reviewed, signed off on, and put into production, right? So here's some of the families we're gonna go over. A lot of times I pick 5 of what I think are the most important on there, but the configuration from this 800-53, we always know the one is the policies and procedures. Baseline configuration, we just looked at that. That was the CM2. Configuration change and control, impact analysis, access restriction for changes, configuration settings, lease functionality, system component inventory, configuration management plan. This is one of the few families that you actually have to have a plan for, right? That lets you know the importance of configuration management. And at the end, we're going to look at one of the special publications, look at the the template for actually building a configuration management plan. Software usage restriction, user installed software, information location, aka data sovereignty, data action mapping, and signed components. Right. So those are all the subfamilies that are in the configuration management family. Right. So I picked a few out of there. I didn't want to get too. Shout out to my man Game Over for joining us. But those are the configuration management subfamilies. And two is, as a GRC person, you need to get comfortable with these families and these subfamilies. Right? The cool thing that we were talking about that these families are going to usually be the same in CMC, NIST 171, which is actually builds on CMC, NIST CSF, another version of protect, identify, right? That whole thing. So even if you look at HIPAA and high trust, a lot of these families cross over. ISO is going to have configuration management in it, right? So a lot of these are going to transfer over. We discussed. You don't need to know every family. You just need to get comfortable with a couple of the big ones. Then you'll be able to do assessment work, audit work across really any of the families, right? And it's just really digging into the nuances and the details of those particular families. The two is this is the NIST 800-53, and a lot of times too is I just show this because it shows you which subfamilies are low, moderate, and high. I do a lot of IRS work. If it's not life or death, it's moderate, and if it's life or death, it's high. So just kind of looking at baseline is both low, moderate, and high in there, which we didn't talk about the subfamilies and the enhancements a lot of time. Automation support for accuracy and currency. Right. So how do you automate your cloud formation? How do you automate your builds so there be accuracy? You can go out too and take your cloud formation, which is your YAML, and actually compare it to what you built. Right. We do that in tests. Right. So we can figure out if there's any slippage or leakage, or a lot of times somebody could have a production problem. They actually put in production, but they don't go back and update the baseline configuration file. Right, a lot of times we want to do baseline configuration, test, integrated test, production. But a lot of times, sometimes you got stuff in production, you got to fix it in production, right? So how do you go back and get those changes into your baseline? Right, change control, both of those are moderate and high. Impact analysis. This came from NIST 800 R5. The B, there's an A and B. This is the B. So I like to look out there what's moderate, what's high level. A lot of times, even if I'm working on a moderate system, if I could put on a couple high level controls, right, that shows that we're going above and beyond. If a hacker actually hacked us, or if we got challenged in court, we can say we were not negligent, right? We did the modern and we try to put a couple highs on. So cryptography management. So are you using FIPS 140-2? Are you using BitLocker in Windows? Are you using AWS KMS keys? So how are you handling your key management? How are you tracking your keys, right? That is a high level control. All right. So those are some things too we talk about. The two is all those ones we looked at are here. Then they have their enhancement control, periodic review, prevent program execution, registration compliance, deny by exception, allow by exception. Right. So those are additional controls you can put on there. A lot of times, if they don't have anything, those could be used for compensating controls for other things. Assess configuration and improve deviation. All right. We were talking about doing a risk exception. There's something about the application where we have to cut out some controls. So how do you do a risk assessment and approve that deviation? Right? Those have to be approved. And a smaller company, a lot of times the CISO has to put his name on it, right? Or your senior manager for security. So see if there's any questions. I appreciate that. Team 53 Smee. Yep, doing that 53 live. So let's walk through it. Once again, if y'all got any questions, just drop them in the chat. Shout out to my man Tobias. We're gonna definitely get him out here and interview it. I keep saying I'm gonna do interviews in 2025. So shout out to my man before the billions. He's got me thinking about interviewing. So let's get on it real quick. We always know that the -1 for the configuration is the policies and procedures. Develop, document, and disseminate mission and business process level. Configuration management policy address purpose, scope, roles, and responsibility, and management commitment. Right, that's going to be for any security family. When you do the -1, we're definitely going to talk about the policies and procedures of that and what that looks like. The other thing too is why you have to get legal involved a lot of times. Organizational entities, compliance, and it's consistent with applicable laws, executive orders, directives, regulation, policies, standards, and guidelines, and procedures to facilitate the implementation of those policies. Right? I appreciate that. Shout out to Chris. Shout out to my man. Go check him out before the billions. About to get Larry. Drop the GRC channel on there, Chris. Go check out the GRC family. I'm usually hanging out with the young guys. So definitely come check us out the GRC family, the GRC Mafia. We're definitely doing some things. So let's keep going. We ain't gonna be here all night, so let's keep going. Two, we just looked at that too. Develop, document, and maintain the configuration controls, current baseline. Baseline configuration for systems and component includes connectivity, operation, and communication aspects. We looked at that above, pulled that directly straight out of the NIST 800-53R5, right, for the CM2 baseline. So are you keeping track about that? How do you get those builds? How do you have a meeting and go over those changes and make sure those changes are secure, right, with your architects, with your engineers, right, so everybody can understand what's going on. And those guys with the supervisors gotta relate those changes counter to management so they understand what those are. A lot of times, though, they're looking for certain features and certain enhancements, right, to support their infrastructure, make some money, save some money, right? So people are usually familiar with those type of changes, right? So configuration change control, determine, document the type of changes to the systems that are configuration control, review proposed configuration control changes to the system, approved or disapproved such changes with explicit consideration for, that's us right there, security and privacy impact analysis, right? And I lump that in with compliance, right? Explicit consideration for security and privacy. Document the configuration changes, decisions associated with the system. Implement approved configuration control changes to the system. Retain records of configuration control changes, right? So they need to be checked in somewhere. System manager, if you're in AWS, if you have some kind of versioning control, what Git is one of the famous ones, right? So where are you checking those changes in? So in case you need to roll back, or a lot of times if you get audited, they're gonna want to see those changes, where you have them saved. And two is where you'll write up to those changes. And once again, where's your privacy and security impact? So a lot of times if you build a new functionality, a new module, where a lot of times is how are you connecting, right? Is it an API? Is it SOAP? Is it an SOA? Is it encrypted? Is it HTTPS? Is it FIPS? How are you doing that, right? We always talk about zero trust now. Right? So do you have those zero trust fundamentals in your architecture, that building, right? Those will be in your write-up so your auditors can see that. And we just talked about that. Impact analysis, right? Now we drill it down. Analyzes the changes to the system to determine the potential security, privacy, and impact. Right? So they talked about talking about them and rationalizing. Now we talk about what is the impact. Right? If it for some reason we couldn't put encryption on at the level we wanted and it was a little lower because of the act, right? What impact is on the system? Does that make the risk higher? And if the risk higher, what's compensating controls are we trying to make it lower, right? From the impact analysis. We couldn't do this level of encryption, but we added a VPN, right? Zero trust. We added VPN and NAC, so we took checking the health of the system to make sure the VPN's at the level it should be at. The encryption on there, BitLocker's on there, right? So that's kind of part of the analysis, the impact analysis you would have to drill down into. Access restrictions for change. Define, document, improve, enforce physical and logical access restriction associated with the change to the system. Change the hardware, software, firmware, system, or operating procedures related to system can potentially have a significant effect on security of systems or individual privacy. All right. At the bottom, you see it. What software libraries are you using? What workflow automation are you using? Do you have BitLocker cut on? Do you have BitLocker not cut on? So, what are those access restrictions to make it more secure? All right, you got VPN, you got username and password, you using MFA. You know we gotta be using MFA, but those are some of the access restriction for change that you would identify in that. All right, let's see if there's any questions. Let's see. Oh, scroll up. Shout out to Dwight doing that CIPP. I seen my scene. Big Cam, Big Money PBO, Remote OG. Trying to survive out here. Trying to survive out here. Can you discuss a bit more on the change advisory board versus configuration board? Is it interchangeable, or also what is the typical process? There are interchangeable, really depending on the size of the company. A lot of times, smaller company they kind of doing it all together. But when you work for large Fortune 500 companies, those are separated, right? The configuration change board is what are you adding to your architecture and what are you doing, right? A lot of times the change advisory board is more at a organizational level, where I can see the configuration change board is more at the system and architectural level. Usually the change advisory board I see is usually more at the organizational level, meaning they look at the configuration changes, but they kind of look at it more of a holistic. These are the changes in the configuration board. Okay, are there any advisory? We doing something to VMware? Is there anything out of VMware with some, advisory? So I think the change advisory board is more at an organizational level, and usually at a bigger company, the configuration change board you usually have your system engineers, your developers in there, your cloud engineers, and the change advisory board is more of management. What do we got going on? Is there anything we see is gonna affect us? When I was at DoD, a project put something out on DoD network, it killed all the other projects. So I changed advisory boards. We looking at all the projects coming in from DoD that's in our network that could affect us, right? From that. So that's what I see a lot of times on that, Chris. Let me know if that made sense, Chris. I'm over there rambling a little bit tired. PMO, you gotta get a sign hung up, flip your screen the right way, hang it up, man. I'm trying. I'm struggle streaming over here, Big Cam. You right. Shout out to Big Cam. Work with him doing a big thing. Got to jump. I appreciate it. Getting ready for maintenance tonight. Let's get together, do an interview. I would love to share my knowledge. Shout out Big Time Networking, doing a big thing. We always talking about getting into networking because from a cybersecurity, controlling the flow of your data is always big on that. So got to get your networking guy in there. We'll actually be in there. In that CCB, we got to get our network guys. What are you doing to the network? Are you changing some routing? Are you changing somewhere now I can't connect, right? So in a large company, that's kind of what I see more on that front. Like I said, when I DoD, the advisor, they was worried about, are we going to take down another project or somebody could take us down? Because you're talking about really the whole holistic of the whole network, right? And once again, configuration changes. Usually your project, what's specifically, is going to affect it. The cool thing about that, like my boss said, that's really all we care about. Shout out to Before the Billions joining us. I just gave him a shout out. Let him know. Let's show him. We shared out his channel. That's him live in person. So I gave him a shout out. We want to show that he's we sharing his channel. Come check us out at Study GRC 2. We doing some things. Fact shout out. We used to work. I told y'all when I kind of pissed off Microsoft one time, they had the lobbyists come for PBO. So we had Big Cam come on to talk about that. So, what's up, Shango? Not the doctor. I appreciate that, man. I always give the PhDs love. Yeah, Big Cam, we work together, so we're gonna definitely bring him on. Actually, I interviewed him, so I actually interviewed Big Cam, so we're gonna get him back on. So let's keep going. We're going through the configuration management. Like I said, I pulled out like 5 of them that we can drill down more into there. Chris asking great questions, so we can drill down in there. Configuration setting, right? So now we talked about the configuration board, but the actual configuration setting, especially if you're I'm an AWS fan guy, so if the S3 buckets and KMS, are you managing the keys, or is AWS managing the keys, or you got custom keys you brought up from Komodo over to that? Those are the actual specific settings. So establishing document configuration settings for components employed within the system that reflect the most restrictive mode consistent with operational user. I had to hit that restrictive because usually that's more security. Implement configuration settings, identify, document, improve any deviation from established configuration settings, and based on the requirements and monitoring. We know that organizational defined operational requirements for me are the IRS, right? Those are IRS Pub 1075 requirements. I try to do big system and big things, so that's kind of how we would do it. Let's see, system component inventory. You got to identify each one of your systems. It's hard to secure what you don't know. So part of that is, what is your system component inventory, which is a little more detailed. Develop and document an inventory of system components that accurately reflect the system, including all components within the system. Does not include duplicating accounting for components or components assigned to any other system. It's at the level of granularity deemed necessary for tracking and reporting, including the following information: achieve system component accountability. Right? We struggle with that from a database. Are you talking about indexes? You talking about primary keys? Surrogate keys? Are you talking about the actual BitLocker settings? So what level of components what level do you need to get at? The cool thing now is with CDBs, they can actually scan and get you that information. So it's a lot easier to get now. System components are discrete, identifiable information technology assets, including hardware, software, and firmware. Organization may choose to implement a centralized, that's what we're talking about, system component inventory. System manager and AWS include components for all organizational systems, right? And that's really what when we looked up there, you need to automate some of this stuff, right? Then you use your internal assessment to make sure that your automation is working correctly. So you look in there and you say, okay, this is our Windows setup. We're using 2022. We're using BitLocker. All right, you use Puffin and Chef to set those settings to what they should be, right? But you got to keep that in baseline. The other big part is configuration management plan, right? This is one of the few things that people have actual plan. So 18 watching me share 18 likes. I appreciate that. Give my likes up now. I'm just playing. Watching on 2 devices. I appreciate you, Big Kale. Let's go. Give my likes up now. Let's go. I appreciate everybody for joining PBO on Late Night with PBO. Let's look at it. Configuration management plan. So there's a few things: configuration management, incident response. There's one more. Those are the 2 I know you definitely have to have plans for, and probably Coop. Right? Coop is not as big a thing. Most people have laptops and you can work remotely, even if there was an emergency. So, but DR. So, what's your DR plan? Where are you rolling over to? Are you doing a pilot plan? Hot, cold, warm sites? Right. So those are the things. So let's talk about the configuration management plan. And in the end, I got a template special publication. We're going to kind of go over at a high level what should actually be in your plan. As an IS auditor, internal assessment guy, those are the things I look for, right? Configuration plan is definitely up there. Develop, document, and implement a configuration management plan for systems that address roles, responsibility, configuration management process, and procedures. Establish a process for identifying configuration management items throughout the system development lifecycle. For management configuration management of configuration items, define the configuration items for the system and place the configuration items, right? So how do you do it? Where's your documentation? And 2 is, once again, I got a template. PBO been doing this for a long time, so we got a lot of templates to this back pocket. So we're actually going to look at a template so we can actually see that in there. And you see it right there. So those are a couple plans. I try to pull out 5. Let's go back to the top real quick. So these are all the ones that are actually in configuration management plan, configuration management family, security family, policies and procedure, baseline, configuration control, impact analysis, access restriction for change, configuration setting, least functionality, system component inventory, configuration management plan. I should have put that in red. Software usage restriction, right? That's part of UAP. Uh, User acceptable policy. What software can you actually run on our box before you get in trouble? User installed software. We probably don't let you install software unless you're a developer, unless you B2B, right? You're a data engineer and you're doing big things. Information location, data access, action mapping, and sign components, right? So once again, I pulled 5 out of there, but those are all the configuration management. I call them subfamilies, right, that you could pull from. So let's talk about, there it is. You see it right there, Guide for Security Focused Configuration Management Information Systems. NIST 800-128. I might do a video on that, but these are the kind of documents I use when I help smaller companies, even large companies, comes up with configuration management plan. And this is the appendix of what they're looking for. You see it right there. Appendix D in that plan gives you a simple outline for security configuration management. But realistically, it's really for any configuration management plan. They just really dig in security, right? So at the top, we saw that. Remember, it's looking for the mission, data flow description, system architecture, roles and responsibilities. That's in there. You see that 2.1. We read that. What else? Administration. We talked about there. 2.2.2 configuration control board function. We talked about the organizational level and the system level, right? So Chris asked that question. There's the answer. Tools. What kind of tools are we going to use to automate it, right? Retention, archiving, storage, and disposal. I try to at least keep 10 configuration management case I need to roll back. And 2 is if we get hacked, a lot of times they need to know what were you running 2 years ago, right? That got hacked. We could go back to that configuration management file and say, these are the versions we run and this is what we run. One of those versions could have had a vulnerability open and we could say, oh, that's the reason we got hacked from this version that's in our configuration management, right? So those are other reasons from a security perspective we need to keep track of those. Right, we just talked about the configuration identification. CIs, configuration items. Now we're going to dig down a little more. Configuration baseline, 3.2. Here's some of the common controls. Let's see if there's any questions. So I just want to show from a plan where you could get it and what could help you develop it, right? A lot of people kind of say you got to do a plan, but they don't tell you what's the basis for the plan and how do you start a plan and what level of the plan. We already know NIST is for big boys, so we would probably cut this way down for a smaller company, but this will give you a nice start to show where you were at, right? So basic configuration and management, we talked about that, has been applied to a broad range of products and systems. CM, configuration and management, comprise a collection of activities focused on establishing and maintaining the integrity of products and systems. CI, and identify a part of the system, being hardware, software, documentation, combination of that, right? So all of that. Baseline configuration set of specifications for systems or CI within the system that has been formally reviewed. We talked about that CCB, and Chris talked about the advisory board. That's where the view of those system comes. Let's see what Larry said. Question: does low, moderate, and high designate have an impact on costs like FISMAs? Working with projects downstream, down multiple files, the amount and type of database. Oh yeah. It does have a impact on cost because usually if it's high, it's usually more expensive, or it's usually more expensive or more complicated. A lot of times too is if it's life or death, right? When it gets hacked, it's going to have more impact, right? So yeah, so definitely would have more impact. And yeah, you're right. Across multiple agencies. Long story short, when we were at DoD, somebody put something out and it took down every agency that was on that infrastructure, right? So we start reviewing. So they start putting it out so everybody can review what's happening, changes for the whole data center or the whole system, so you can figure out if it's going to impact you or not. Right. A lot of times we would read it, we would still be like, I don't know, right? But at least you would have some kind of awareness. So you might be able to contact that other system. Okay, we got an Oracle database and you doing something on the data plane. that could affect, us. We might have a database link, which is basically two Oracle databases talking. If somebody's putting something on the data plane, it could block our connections talking, right? So you're right. So that's kind of where those multiple agencies come from, the amount and type of data being shared. But part of that, Larry, is from your CCB. You should have MOUs when you share data with other agencies or even other systems within your organization. So you should kind of have a feeling of what data is being shared, the level of complexity of that data, and the classification. Is it HIPAA? Is it high trust? What's the level of that? And so, oh, definitely, definitely. Because if you mess it up and you could get your FSMA and your ATO taken away, really, right? So if your ATO gets taken away, that's going to cost you extra money. But yeah, anything you do from a bill standpoint with security and privacy, it's going to cost money, time, and resources, right? So the question is, what does that cost? And part of the CCB is putting dollar amounts to those changes, right? Is that 4 FTEs? Is that how many man hours is that? So people do it different ways, but those changes usually from a DoD perspective, even from a consulting basis, Larry, you got to put some dollars amount because those are people in time, right? And that's how you build back. Man, I'm like, what's up? It's all good. It's all good. Let's see. How often are the configuration plans revised? Every year. I think they just switched it every year. Regina, it was every year. I need to dig a little deeper in R5. It was you had to review it every year. But I need to check on that. I'm going with every year, but that was for R4. So I'm going with R4 was every year. Shout out to you. Glad you can do it. Saying one. So let's keep going. We almost done. I'm gonna drop the link if anybody wants to come up. Once again, you see it right there from the plan. You got the configuration board, establishing charter for the group of qualified people with responsibility for controlling and improving changes. Configuration items. I think I just did that. Method for selecting and naming the items. Configuration change control. Process for managing updates to the baseline. Configuration monitor. Process for assessing and testing the level of compliance, right? So once you lock in your configuration baseline, you could use scan tool Rapid7 to see if anything changed that makes your baseline that somebody changed it and then put in the proper documentation, right? So your configuration YAML file, that's actually what gets billed. So they should always match. So a lot of times, probably once a quarter, we'll say, let's take our YAML file and build it in production and compare to make sure that those match. Right. So how do you do configuration monitor to make sure you don't have slight changes? And everybody know I'm an AWS guy. So how does AWS help with configuration management? They got AWS System Manager, provides a centralized configuration control hub for managing changes. AWS Config helps detect configuration drifts, continuously assessing the workload. We just asked, how would you automate that? AWS, we would do config, and OpWorks using Chef and Puppet helps you automate the configuration of cloud services. So individual change, what type of key store are you using? How are you doing it, right? So you would build it a lot of times, and there would be individual settings that you have to do. That's where AWS Ops work, where Chef and Puppet would come into play. So that's the end. Let me drop the link. Just kind of want to touch on that. Let's leave it on that. Let's see if any more questions. You have to check the replay out. It was all good. Rondo Mondo, glad you could join me. You're going to have to check out the replay. If anybody wants to come up, let me... I'm struggling and tired. What's up, man? Oh, that's cool. People want stuff built. Let's see. Understood. Appreciate the explanation. People want stuff built and on us to figure out all the details that they don't think about. Oh, yeah, facts. But that's why we get paid, though. And a lot of times too, that's why AWS and Azure, they have their best practices. They have AWS configs that tell you in there to tell you if you're NIST 800-R5 compliant, if you CMC compliant. So it kind of helps you. And that's what that one thing said. It'll scan and tell you if you're adrift, if you configure something that's not compliant. But that, to be honest, though, that's common. Larry, no, he's in the government. A lot of times we're taking legacy apps. So sometimes those apps won't let us set something that we need to set, right? So maybe we can put on the level of encryption we wanted to. It broke the app, right? A lot of times when you do HTTPS, right, it's going through your ciphers. Maybe there's some ciphers we want to cut on, but the app won't let us cut on, right? So that's part of your CCB. But then the other part of that is just part of your risk acceptance. Our standard setting is to do BitLocker, but this one app didn't like BitLocker on the workstation that was communicated. So we took it off. So who's going to accept that risk, right? So that's part of that. Then we can document it. Then the other part of risk exception is what is our compensating controls if we did something like that, or we took a security feature we usually have on as part of our basic configuration, but now we had to take it off, right? So now we got to document that once again, risk acceptance or risk exemption. Then two, document that. These are our compensating controls. So when the auditors come in, Big Cam know when Booz Allen used to run up on us for an audit, right? We have to be ready, right? They're asking us questions, right? So you have to have that down pat, right? So those are the documentation. And two, once again, us as GRC and security, right? Part of that is the GRC part of that. And the other part of that is the technical, roll your sleeves up. What is this setting on a 2022 Windows server? What setting we couldn't do? What's our configuration in this setting? Because if you look at STIGs, I think there's 289 settings for Windows 2022 server, right? So that would be part of your configuration. You know, Big Tony might be retiring, man. You might get his spot. I need to reach out to him because hell, I'm almost 60. Tony might be, you know, Tony got them great government benefits, man. So shout out to Tony. I might interview him. He owes me an interview, so I might bring him on an interview. He owed me an interview, so I might bring on the CISO. And interview him. So y'all can pepper him up with questions. So now great guy, gave me an opportunity. Kind of let me do my thing. So I gotta bring on the Cam. Now I gotta bring on Big Bond, right? One of my mentors. I thought you was gonna get B5, man. She counting down. But no, but pulling those up there. I dropped down a link if anybody want to come up. But so those are configuration management. Once again, the configuration management plan. Let's hit that. That has some good things. I'm gonna hit that one more time, then PBO might be going to bed. He running out of gas. so you see it right there. So that's it at the top. System mission, data flow diagram, system architecture, system administration, and management activities. What are those? Right. Scope, roles. You see those there. We talked about the configuration board at the organizational level and the system level. From Chris, I always put the advisory even at a higher organizational level, but those are two things you can do. When I was at DOD, change level board was more system. Advisory board was more organizational level. So it depends on the size and how you want to break up your org. But what's that look like? How are you going to meeting? A lot of smaller companies doing stand-up, meeting on those, knocking those off so you can have documentation. The cool thing is, shout out to Chris Whitlock, a lot of times on Teams, we will record those on Teams, then we would just keep the recordings, right? Do those meetings over, have those recordings. So if we get audited, we got our documentation up there and we got our meeting recordings in there, right? So we got to have everybody act serious, right? Because somebody might be reviewing the recordings. But at the end, you see that we talked about the CIs, configuration items. What's your hardware? What's your software? What's your version of the server? What version of OS are you using? What version of the database? Web server, app server, right? All those are CI configuration items. Identification criteria. We talked about system, AWS config, configuration baseline. So when you put something into production, we usually give it a cool name, DOD, D5, 202.11.1. That'd be configured baseline, and that's what we put in production, right? Somebody said, what's in production? This is the baseline. But the thing that's hard to track a lot of times is now is people be doing every 2 weeks doing releases. So you got to keep your baseline in sync, right? Sometimes they're doing automated releases. So then you got to automatically update your baseline, right? So those are some of the new things that are happening out there that we got to keep track of. And once again, getting our compliance engineering going on. So that architecture document. So how do you get a baseline of that? How you do CCB? How do you do advisory control? Right. So all those kind of things rack up and comply. Let's see. Postmortem breach breakdown or useful interviews. I leveled up using that information. Oh, facts. I've done a few here, Justin. I'm sure you were aware. We did Snowflake. I usually doing a postmortem breakdown probably once a quarter. We'd pick one. We did the check out the Snowflake one I did if you're interested. That was super good. If you want to know, let me know. I can put it in the chat for you. But yeah, we did. I love those too. I love those too. Because I use those to figure out, okay, if they got on us, would we been hacked? The other part of that is a lot of times they'll tell you what should have happened so they wouldn't get hacked. So first thing is, if that happened to us, will we get hacked? And the second thing is, do we have the postmortem things that they said we need to put in? Because Snowflake was Ticketmaster. They didn't even have MFA on, right? So I thought that was negligible, right? They were letting people connect to their database from the internet. We were talking about running through, it was AWS, running through our tenant and running through our VPC. Then we could check for stuff in the network packets, right? You could do MITRE. We can see if anybody's moving kind of funny using MITRE, Justin. But no, you're 100% right on, Justin. But yeah, check out my Snowflake one. That was excellent. Don't try. I'm about to block you. I'm gonna time you out. I'm gonna time. BBO, you've been using ChatGPT. Oh yeah. I've been using it a little bit. Yep. I've been using it actually for more documentation, right? I'm gonna start doing those online. Shout out to Before the Billions. He used to do working sessions. I'm gonna start doing working sessions where I might build a configuration management plan using ChatGPT. All right, you could say for this type of company, this type of small, what would you think the roles and responsibilities should be? All right, so you would tell you what those are. For a government facility, ChatGPT, what would you be thinking would be the proper CIs for AWS cloud input, right? What's the best practices for that? It'll tell you, right? So we use ChatGPT to help us build that, all right? So I think Chris went to bed. We were chatting up earlier. Shout out to him. Shout out to Before the Billions. So I'm gonna hang on and see if anybody have any more questions. So that's some of the stuff. Yeah, I got that from you. So I probably start doing working session. Shout out to Before the Billions. I'll be learning from the young guy. So I might let y'all watch me use ChatGPT to build a configuration management plan. Watch ChatGPT help me lab every day doing an AWS VPC infrastructure. Right? We talking about zero trust. So what does that look like if you're running Windows Defender, Cisco Duo, right? So we can do different architectures and what would that look like and how the configuration should be built off of that, right? So shout out to Before the Billion for the working session. I used to check him out, build him. I thought that was cool. So I might start labbing and just doing working storage section and using some of the AWS services I'm trying to use. AWS config, system manager. How would you let it scan and pull in those CIs to build your configuration management plan? And two is in real life, right? A lot of times you got a hybrid. You got an on-prem and a cloud version of that. So what would that look like and how would you keep those configuration management in a hybrid system and what should that look like, right? So those are some of the things we definitely going to chat it up. So like I said, I'm going to hang out a little while. I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. You can reach out for me, which I haven't checked my email, professorblackouts@gmail.com. I just been all over the place recently. I was sick for a couple weeks and it just kind of threw me off. So I need to get back to checking my email. Checking out my man, young Tobias over there. One of my students. I'm gonna start interviewing my students. So I got to jump. So yeah, he had to do some maintenance tonight. that real world maintenance type. So once again, let y'all know PBO taught in real life. So they love everything. So once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. I'm going to do something a little short and sweeter for me tonight. You can reach out for me at Professor BlackOps at gmail.com. And two is a lot of times is hit up B5. I will go on to lunch soon. Yeah, I've been sick, so I need to go with my lunch with my homie, Big Cam and Indy. So definitely going to do that. So once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Once again, reach out to me. If I don't reach out to me, you can. I'll read every comment on my videos because I only have 3,500 subs, a little by 34. So I don't get a ton of comments. So a lot of people ping me on my videos, be like, PBO, read your email, or PBO, look at your LinkedIn. So if you need me and I'm not responding, do that. Or I definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I usually look at that a little more. I'm usually on LinkedIn, checking my email, networking with people. So I'm probably a little easier to connect on LinkedIn. Let me show my LinkedIn real quick. Let's see. I think that'll show up. That's me on LinkedIn with my flip phone. I need to upgrade it. Me suited out with the flip phone. That's probably 2002. So I need to upgrade. I just like that picture. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. I'm going to check my email. I've been slacking. Like I said, reach out. I'm usually in Study GRC. I'm on Before the Billions. I'm usually in his Discord. I'm usually in Study GRC Discord. I'm in a lot of Discord. Simply Cyber, Space Tacos. I'm usually in like 6 or 7. Discord. So usually if you at me, I usually see you in one of the Discord. Oh, all right, I'm dropping. Thanks again. I appreciate you. So check out Chris, definitely running that Study GRC. I usually hang out with those guys a ton. Shout out to the GRC Mafia. Shout out to Before the Billions. Shout out to Shango doing big things. Shout out to my homie Big Cam. I definitely have to get him on here and do another interview. Shout out to Justin. Shout out to Regine. Let me know what you think of that data center. It's like a week ago. I did that for you, talking about availability zone. Actually, that helped me out a lot. I think I was just a tad bit off on my availability zones on AWS. That's the reason I do these for it, because a lot of times you think or some of these are super complex. So I was like, oh, I was a little off on availability zone. So that cleared it up for me, actually. So shout out to availability zone. I appreciate you. So everybody have a good weekend. Let's get that hump day tomorrow. I can't believe really 2024 over with. So let's get it. If you're trying to get it, trying to get a job. Don't give up. Trying to get an internship, trying to get a better job. It's all out there for you. You just got to put in the work. Everybody have a good night. I'm out. Old people going to bed.